Hi, welcome to our museum tour. We're really excited to have you. Please scan the QR code on the next page with your cell phone to access a Google Docs where you can participate with your responses to our tour stops. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy.
Hello, my name is Devin Marin, and welcome to this tour. Today, we will be considering art making in community and the potentially infinite possibilities for collaboration and agency through artworks. We will investigate 4 artworks by paying close attention to the many hands and hearts that go into creating artworks and potentially remaking them through our interpretations and understandings. First, what comes to mind when we think about collaboration or working in community? Who is the owner of a creative work? Does establishing ownership over a work help or hinder that work's effective potential? As we move through this tour today, we hope that you will consider the many stories that contribute to art making, from the materials that go into them to the final project and its exhibition. Given that this tour is recorded, please feel free to go at your own pace, pausing and skipping ahead as you see fit. Do what best supports your experience. As you reflect on the works in this tour, we have provided a QR code to a public Google document if you would like to contribute your reflective work to a larger public archive of this tour experience. We start our tour here at the University of Arizona Museum of Art in Tucson, Arizona. For our first stop, let's take a look at a piece that boasts several artists working individually and yet still collaboratively. This piece is called Community Flag by Artemis W., Austin D., Mercedes M., Ruth Ann G., Sam B., Savannah N., and Lauren Pineda. It was created in 2021 by a community organization known as Mapping Q. Mapping Q is a community program that provides LGBTQ youth a safe space in the museum for art making and acquiring harm prevention methods. This work is a prime example of community authorship, as it literally has multiple artists responsible for its production. Each patch on the flag was designed by a separate participant, which were then all sewn together by another artist to create a symbol of fellowship and belonging. It is the perfect metaphor for art as a method of connecting others and unknown artists being granted an access point into the museum through community engagement. The first question I would like you to consider is, how is the community engagement behind the flag physically evident in the finished piece? How have flags historically been used to signify community and togetherness? What are the cultural implications behind museum programming that benefits the needs of the community? And of hanging art by supposedly unknown artists in a museum setting? Remember, you can pause the video to ponder these questions at any time. Next, let's move on to our activity. Think of a community that you belong to. Which is the most important to you? Why do you feel this way? What is it that makes it so special? Now, imagine that you need to condense all of these feelings down into your own patch, the size of a couple inches. Take a few moments, grab some art supplies, whatever you prefer and have handy, and sketch out what this patch would look like. Would you add it to this flag? Or would you create your own flag? Think about how you would like to connect this patch with others in your community. Maybe it doesn't need to be attached to a flag at all. You can consider other ways to join with others. Get creative. This patch doesn't have to be a work of visual art. Maybe it has a poem written on it, or lyrics to a song. You can come up with a symbol to represent a dance or play that you invent. Whatever makes you feel connected and artistic. When you've finished, if you're comfortable, share your patch with others in your group, your home, around you, whoever you find close and is near. Explain why you made this patch and how it relates to your chosen community. Compare it with others or even with those on the flag itself. How are they the same? And how are they different? Remember, you can share this patch with others who take this tour on our Google Doc using our QR code. Now, I will go ahead and hand things over to Raven, who will be discussing the broader context and environment that a piece has to offer and the implications that come with it.
Thank you, Devin. We will now transition outside the UAMA to this bronze sculpture by Francisco Zuinga. We will begin by shifting our attention from the minute details of the previous community flag to larger information constructing the environment around the sculpture. Engage the space with all accessible senses. Please imagine those that are not available to us given the digital format of this tour. This sculpture, along with the biographical information on Zuinga's sculptural origins, apprenticing for his father, along with his work in intentional artistic communities, invites dialogue surrounding the many hands and hearts which make and remake this work. Zuinga's consistent use of indigenous women as his subjects, this work is a prime example, opens up a dialogue surrounding representation and voice of those historically marginalized within the art world and society at large.
Hi, my name's Raven Moffett. I'm an MFA student at the University of Arizona, and today we're going to be talking about Francisco Zuinga's sculpture here, which is installed right in front of the UAMA and also the School of Art building. So it's at the heart of campus. So I'm going to start off by giving a little bit of contextual information. Francisco Zuinga, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. I did watch a video to learn, but I am myself still learning. He was born in Costa Rica in 1912, but he spent most of his adult life living and working in Mexico with his partner, where he then died in 1998. The piece that we're looking at is Mujer de Pie con Manos en la Cara, which was sculpted in 1976. It's made of bronze. Since this is installed outside on campus, I'm going to invite some touch here in a second. So Francisco Zuinga married Mexican painter Elena Laborde in 1947 after meeting her when she was a student at La Esmeralda, the National Art School in Mexico City, where Zuinga taught. Elena studied with Frida Kahlo. You may be familiar with her work. And her relationship with Kahlo linked Zuinga's generally apolitical stance to the politically charged topics of his work, including indigenous sovereignty, women's rights, and environmental stewardship. So when asked himself about the politics of his work, Zuinga often shies away from the topic, but his relationality and his working in community and the subject matter that he frequents inevitably roots him in a political stance. Zuinga was again born in Costa Rica in 1912. He was exposed to art at a very young age because his father was a sculptor of religious statues. This is where Zuinga learned his love for sculpture. He apprenticed as an assistant in his father's sculpture workshop from 1928 to 1934, while also receiving lessons in drawing and painting. So as we can see in this sculpture, women feature prominently as the subject matter in much of Zuinga's sculptures and paintings. His sculptural style is heavily influenced by pre-Columbian art, and his figures are frequently suggestive of indigenous Latin American lifeways. This sculpture has a name. I'm going to reveal it to you, but if you would rather leave the mystery alive, feel free to skip forward about 5 seconds. So this sculpture is of Avelia from Veracruz. So I invite you all to play along with me in a facilitated activity that can be done in person or using your imagination online. It can be done with groups or it can be done solo. I'm gonna invite some questions to start us off. First, whether in person or viewing this online, what do you notice about the physical materials with which this work was made? Feel of its surface. List the qualities of the bronze. How does it feel and how are you surprised? If you're not able to physically touch, you can take note of the marks in the sculpture, the little divots and ridges, almost reminiscent of a landscape or perhaps the texture of an oil painting. When we feel of her figure, who is standing super tall, I'm 5'4" for reference, we notice that her belly is swollen, and we can take note also of her posture, looking up and holding her face, and also the fabric of her clothes draped loosely around the body. You may or may not know her name, but who do you think the subject is? What does her body posture tell us about her story, her history, her life, or her culture? Does she stand for something? Is she asking something? If so, what? So thinking with stories and thinking with this sculpture's voice as a subject, what stories can the materials of this piece tell as well? Do they intersect with the story that this figure is telling herself, or do they tell opposing or collaborative stories? Lastly, what is the effect of engaging with this subject in this material space? How does it connect us to the space and land, if at all? So, given that this sculpture is installed on the University of Arizona's campus, we need to acknowledge that we're on the ancestral homelands of Tonotum, Hatchitotum, and Paskayaki, and we want to thank them for their stewardship of this land, acknowledge their survivance, and also, given that acknowledgement, take concrete actions following to listen to them, respect their stories, respect their land, and eventually, as quickly as possible, return the land to their care. So I have these kind of prompting questions out in the air. The activity that I'm going to ask you all to play along with me or with a group in is begin by interacting with this sculpture with all accessible senses. So if you're totally online, that might mean just pausing the frame to look at the details of her. You can imagine what it might smell like or sound like in the space. If you're here physically, take note of that. Breathing the air, what is the quality of the air? You can hear the birds around. What's the quality of the light? And how does this influence your interaction with her? If visiting in a group, ask for one volunteer to imagine themselves in the place of the sculpture. This person will take on the identity of this sculpture in its entirety. Other group members may engage in a dialogue with the participant acting as the sculpture. Conversations may include questions about their origins and experiences as a work of art related to the surrounding place. What has this piece experienced in its time here? What does she see, hear, smell, taste, feel? What has she learned? Conversations may also engage the sculpture's material function. Ask who and why she was made. Did she consent? Feel free to branch out from verbal dialogue alone and act out responses. Give embodied gestural engagement. If visiting the sculpture by oneself, have the same conversation either spoken and acted out loud or in one's head. Just to note, these questions are meant as suggestive points of departure and can be used as a starting point, but it's helpful in challenging the group to go beyond the questions that I've already kind of branched out and personalize their interaction. So it's a game of role play. And I want to caution speaking for her, but instead trying to put yourself in her shoes and understand her voice through play. After one has done this activity, I encourage folks to reflect on the activity either through further conversation in a group or just with the sculpture in the space, or silent contemplation and meditative creative process. This could be writing poems, drawing, however you feel like digesting the information. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for playing along. Our last two works have addressed the multiple hearts and hands that not only go into the production of artworks, but also extend to those who encounter these works after their completion. by continuing that labor through personalized and community-based interaction and embodied interpretation. Next, we will turn to Jacob, who's looking at a work living in the UAMA, which depicts and invokes community at a highly intimate level.
Thanks, Raven. That was an insightful journey into the sculptor's life. One of my favorite things is to learn the influence the artists' lives had on their work. To understand the artist's life brings context to the scale, material, and themes found within a work of art. For a majority of Andy Warhol's work, his personal life gives meaning to his imagery. This concept of art being created from life is exemplified in his 1977 Polaroid titled Barberheiser. Warhol used the Polaroid medium both in a studio and domestic setting, employing the camera in candid ways to capture the community that passed through his studio. In this Polaroid, publisher, writer, and silver factory scenester Barbara Heiser gazes directly at the lens with her back turned to the camera. Notice how the composition is awash in warm tones. What kinds of sensations do the colors evoke? How do the colors of the composition and the positioning of the subject coexist within the photograph? Grab out a piece of paper. Pause the video if necessary. Engage with this work of art for a couple minutes. Allow yourself to think freely and ask yourself questions. Take out a sheet of paper and draw a line down the center. On the left-hand side, jot down a few descriptive words about Warhol's photograph. Use words to describe both what you see in the work as well as how the work makes you feel. Try to personify yourself as the subject being photographed by Warhol. Write how you would feel in front of Warhol's camera. Would you feel differently if the photographer was somebody else? Write on the page whether you would like, comment, or follow Warhol on Instagram. Pause the video if necessary. Now, grab out your cell phone and take a selfie of yourself. Write on the right-hand side of the page a few words about your photograph. Use the words to describe what you see in the photograph, as well as how you felt while taking it. Think about how taking a selfie differs from having your photograph taken. Does one way feel more natural than the other to you? Write on the page whether you would post, keep, or delete the selfie. Warhol's Polaroids tell a visual history of his life, much like selfies and social media of today. What similarities do you see between Warhol's photographs and the ones posted to social media on a daily basis? If Warhol was alive today, would he be an influencer? How does photography connect us to the outside world, as well as allow us to share and create a rich inner world? This is only one way in which art can function as a catalyst for community interactions. Sol LeWitt's Circle and Towers is a good example of how art and community coexist. Fundamentally, LeWitt's art cannot exist without community intervention, much like Warhol's photographs. For participation is needed to activate the work. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the museum tour.
Thanks, Jacob, and howdy, y'all. My name's Daedalus Hoffman, and I'm at the University of Texas at Austin, which is where we find the last artwork on our tour. Equal parts sculpture, monument, and architecture, Sol LeWitt's Circle with Towers is a low, circular wall lined by 8 pale, concrete rectangular towers, and situated outdoors on the campus of the University of Texas at Austin as a part of the Landmarks collection. Let's start off our discussion about this artwork with a simple question. What about Sol LeWitt's Circle with Towers stands out to you? You can pause this video here to reflect and respond. This artwork offers college students and visitors to the 40 acres a place to meet and gather as a community, or for an individual to reflect and recharge in the open air. What do you notice about the materials this work is made of? touch it in your mind, with your body, or both? How does it feel? You can pause this video here to reflect and respond. Sol LeWitt purposely situates circle with towers at the ambiguous intersection of sculpture and architecture. In doing so, the artist questions the essential structure of each discipline, as well as the strictures that support such distinctions in the first place. In other words, through Circle with Towers, LeWitt asks, how do sculpture and architecture as communities of practice feed and form one another? You can pause this video here to reflect and respond. Drawing our attention to the artist practice, LeWitt maintained a didactic relationship with the fabrication of his work, offset by his fascination with labor, and consequently shifted notions of authorship away from the object and toward the idea it represented. For LeWitt, these ideas were often about form, which further complicates how the viewer is meant to place the artist in the context of his own work. Put another way, through Circle with Towers, LeWitt probes our notions of authorship and collaboration, asking, who made this work, and why does that matter? You can pause this video here to reflect and respond. It's important to note that large-scale public sculptures such as Circle with Towers are mostly made beyond the bounds of the artist's studio. However, LeWitt seized these opportunities to expand his circle of collaborators. As Veronica Roberts, curator of modern and contemporary art at the Blanton Museum of Art, explains, while Circle with Towers is initially credited to LeWitt, who died in 2007 at the age of 78, it is actually the work of two teams of artists who executed the artist's ideas. That might not seem so unusual for large-scale works of public art, until you consider that LeWitt never intended to make the work with his own hands. For LeWitt, a work of art was simply a carrier of an idea rather than a precious object, something produced by others from a set of instructions. How does this artwork use space to connect and separate us? You can pause this video here to reflect and respond.